Christine Milne's in our Parliament House studio. Senator, good morning.
And good morning, Fran.
Looks as though the Gillard government will not be introducing this legislation today as planned. What do you think? Will we ever see this bill?
Very hard to say, Fran, but I'm really pleased that the campaign across the community to dump this legislation has had the effect that we hoped it would. And I think the good part about this is that there might be some longer term and more considered ways of dealing with electoral reform. We do need it, as you rightly said earlier, and in particular we need to be able to limit corporate donations. That is the big problem here with this bill. It was about giving money to political parties but without the quid pro quo of getting rid of the corporate donations.
I want to come to some of that in a moment, but we better deal with this first because there has been some notice paid to the fact that the Greens were very opposed, loudly opposed to these reforms, but you also would have been happy to take the money. The Greens would have been eligible under this deal for extra funds. Why isn't that cynical at the very least?
Well, we wanted to get rid of this bill and we've worked very hard to do that. We started the campaign to dump the legislation and we're going to hopefully have that outcome. However, had Liberal and Labor stuck together in the way that they'd planned to do and got it through, we certainly weren't going to be in the position of having the electorate denied strong representation from the Greens and other minor parties, because all of the money would have then just gone to the two old parties to entrench the two-party system, when we're hearing that the role that the Greens are playing in standing up for what matters is what the community actually wants, and that's what we'll be strongly saying to them in the election, and we're not going to see the electorate done down by all of the money going to the old parties.
And the independents and the micro parties would have even more of a case to argue there, wouldn't they? Because this could see them absolutely miss. It also had the impact of taking away the money that some of them currently qualify for.
That's right. So I think what the community wants is a strengthening of alternative voices in the parliament, and the fact that the two old parties got together to try and ram this through right at the end of a period of government just leading into an election really was on the nose for the electorate. But the great thing about this, Fran, is it's given the community a sense of its own power. People were starting to feel like they couldn't influence Canberra no matter what they did. Now, with the Greens leading the charge to dump the bill, people have seen if you stand up and you campaign for this, you can bring pressure to bear. So the next campaign is really on Tony Abbott to tell him to back off the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. The community wants 100% renewable energy. We want to see large solar thermal plants and so on across Australia. The community's had one win on Tony Abbott and he's caved. Let's get him to back off the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Let's keep that money going into renewables.
Let's stick with electoral reform for now. This was meant to be the hallmark of this hung parliament. It was a deal signed at the beginning of it with the independents and the Gillard government for electoral reform. If this bill's gone, there's nothing except, as Paul Bongiorno reminded us, a bill currently sitting in the Senate that's been passed by the reps. Is there positives in that bill? It certainly does have a lower cap for donations to be reported.
Well, certainly the Greens signed an agreement with Prime Minister Gillard as well on electoral reform, and that, similar to what the independents had, some of that is reflected in the bill that's already passed the reps, and that certainly does bring down the disclosure cap. So that says that if people give a donation beyond $1,000, they have to disclose it, whereas currently that figure is about $11,500. So that's a significant improvement in transparency and disclosure. Also, it would mean that those donations are disclosed in a more timely manner rather than such a long time after the donation is made. So there are positives there, but it does do nothing to curb corporate donations, and that's where the main community focus really is, saying, why are we allowing the corporate sector to have such disproportionate influence on public policy? And people quite like what has happened in New South Wales, where there has been a clampdown on corporate donations, particularly from property developers and the like.
So you're not inclined then to pass the bill that's sitting in the Senate, or to try and get that put and passed because it doesn't have the corporate donation cap on it, in it?
Oh, well, we'll certainly have a look at that bill if the government decides to put it back on.
Would you be urging the government to do that?
And well, there are amendments in it we certainly like, Fran. One is truth in advertising. That was something we put very strongly to the government when it went through the lower house last time, and we'd certainly be negotiating on amendments because we want to strengthen the bill.
What about another? I'm just wondering about if this bill goes down and nothing else is there immediately. There are other elements of this bill which haven't got much of a look in. As I understand it, currently the $2.47 per vote that candidates who poll over 4% get from taxpayer funds, that would be changed under this new bill so that candidates can't receive more money than they spend. That's another positive change. And again, this leaves no action on that front.
Yes, that's a positive change, and that came about because some candidates are perennials. They just run in the election in order to try to get 4% of the vote, and if they do get 4%, then the funding kicks in, and that keeps them afloat for another couple of years, and they run at the next election. And so people have said they're sick of that, and they want to see people scamming the system being stopped in doing that, and that was certainly a positive, Fran.
So just to sum it up, if this bill doesn't get introduced today, doesn't get introduced into this Parliament, Parliament could rise. We go to an election with no electoral reform from this term. It's been a long time from electoral reform. The old rules stay in place. The $12,000 cap, you get nothing.
Well, but the community gets what it set out to do, and that is to dump this rushing through at the last minute of legislation which gave so much to political parties without the quid pro quo of curbing corporate donations. And I think what it's got is the community focused on it. I don't think anyone likes racing reform through just ahead of an election, Fran. That really concerns the community about what else is going on. We do need electoral reform, but there's no reason that it needs to be rushed within 5 minutes of an election. If it's left to the last minute, that's when people worry about it.
Christine Milne, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Greens leader, Senator Christine Milne. It's 7 minutes to 8.
RN